My name's Jake Marshall, and I've been driving trucks for over 30 years across the highways of America. Most nights are routine. Engine hums, headlights slicing through darkness, radio chatter from other truckers. But this night was different. I was heading from Tampa to St. Petersburg on I-4. Around 4 a.m., the highway practically empty, save for a couple of semis ahead, their CB radios crackling back and forth like ghosts in the dark. The night was unusually still. Moonlight glimmered off the asphalt, and the stretch of road ahead seemed to stretch forever. I was wide awake, focused, when out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of white. At first I thought it was a trick of the shadows, maybe a reflection from the guardrail. But as I got closer, my stomach dropped. There it was. A human figure, climbing up the bridge girder about 50 feet ahead. I slammed on the brakes instinctively, heart hammering. What in God's name? I squinted, trying to make sense of it. The figure wore a full-body white suit, head to toe, like some kind of skin-tight uniform. Its hands clung to the railing, and one foot stepped carefully over the edge, balancing effortlessly. When it looked at me, I swear, its face had no expression, just a dead, hollow stare that burned into my windshield. I reached for the CB mic, ready to call out to the other drivers, but hesitated. What would they think? They'd probably think I was hallucinating or worse. So, I stayed silent, gripping the wheel, my pulse rattling my chest. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, just stared as I passed underneath, my headlights illuminating its pale form for a fleeting second. I could feel a cold shiver running down my spine. Minutes later, I pulled off at the nearest rest area, my hands still shaking. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe it was a bizarre costume. Maybe even fatigue playing tricks on me. But my gut told me otherwise. The world felt off, like I'd crossed some invisible line into a place where normal rules didn't apply. I sat in the cab, staring at the highway, waiting for something, anything to make sense of what I had just seen. And then it hit me. I wasn't alone. Somewhere behind me, in the dark stretch of road I had just driven, there was movement, a shadow flitting along the edge of the woods. I don't know if it followed me or if it was just part of the night, but the unease settled deep in my bones. I started the engine, hesitant, and merged back onto I-4, determined to reach St. Petersburg as fast as the road would let me. But the feeling wouldn't leave. Every curve, every overpass, every flicker of the streetlights seemed to whisper that whatever I had seen wasn't finished with me yet. And as the city lights of Tampa faded behind me, I knew this night was going to be one I'd never forget. The hum of my engine was the only sound as I merged back onto I-4, the city lights of Tampa shrinking behind me. I tried shaking off the unease, telling myself I'd seen a costume or some late-night daredevil. But my gut screamed otherwise. Mile markers blurred past, my eyes scanning the shadows along the tree line, every rustle of leaves twisting my nerves tighter. About 20 minutes into the drive, I noticed something strange in my side mirror. A flicker of white, just like the figure on the bridge, danced along the shoulder behind me. My pulse doubled. My first instinct was to hit the gas, but my hands were glued to the wheel. I couldn't look away. The shape seemed to mirror every turn I made, staying a perfect distance behind, never approaching, never retreating. Traffic was light, almost non-existent, which made the sight all the more unsettling. There was no way anyone could have followed me this precisely, not with the empty roads and vast stretches of forest on either side. The CB radio crackled from one of the other trucks up ahead, their voices distant and mundane. But it did nothing to calm me. The figure didn't respond to reality. It existed on its own, somewhere between shadow and form, unblinking, unyielding. I forced myself to focus on the road, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was a reflection from my headlights. Maybe I was just exhausted. But the more I tried to rationalize, the more impossible it seemed. Every instinct I had screamed at me that this was something else. Something that shouldn't exist on a highway at 4 a.m., in plain sight, yet utterly untouchable. Then the figure shifted, not just in movement, but in presence. My chest tightened, my palms slick with sweat. It was closer, keeping pace without effort. The world around me felt heavier, like gravity had thickened, pressing me down into the seat. My headlights couldn't pierce it completely, its edges blurred, almost shimmering. It wasn't walking, it was gliding, hovering just above the pavement in a way that defied logic. I passed under a bridge, my heart thundering in my ears. For a moment I lost sight of it in the shadows. But then it was there again, appearing in the far lane, perfectly aligned with me, like it had always been there. I blinked, thinking my mind was playing tricks, but it remained. Dead eyes, featureless face, pale suit glowing faintly under the streetlights. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel so tight it ached. Something inside me whispered to stop. Just pull over, let it pass, whatever it is. But another voice, sharper and louder, screamed, "Drive! Don't look away! Don't stop!" My instincts wrestled with each other as I navigated the winding highway towards St. Petersburg. Every mile marker felt like an eternity. Every flicker of light, every shadow was a potential threat. And then it did something I'll never forget. The figure leaned forward, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, and locked its gaze on me through the side mirror. That dead, empty stare burned into my soul. And in that instant, I knew. It wasn't just observing. It was waiting, watching, judging. Something primal, something beyond human comprehension, had latched onto me. I pushed harder on the accelerator, weaving through the sparse traffic. St. Petersburg wasn't far now, the skyline beginning to pierce the horizon with sleepy, pre-dawn light. But the figures stayed with me. Every turn, every stretch of road, it remained, silent, relentless, and impossible. My hands shook, my vision tunneled. I realized that whatever I was dealing with, this night had become far more than a drive home, and as the first hints of sunlight began to glaze the road, I could feel it. This was only the beginning. The first rays of dawn barely touched the horizon as I neared the outskirts of St. Petersburg. Streetlights flickered off one by one, and the city began to stir with the early hum of morning traffic. My hands were numb from gripping the wheel, eyes darting constantly to the side mirrors. The figure was gone, or at least I thought it was. My pulse had barely slowed, but the sense of being watched clung to me like a second skin. As I merged onto a stretch of highway, lined with towering pines and abandoned industrial buildings, I noticed a hitchhiker, an impossibly thin silhouette standing perfectly still in the median. My heart skipped a beat. The figure was eerily familiar. The same featureless face and glowing white suit from the bridge and roadside. My rational brain screamed at me to swerve, to drive around it, but something about the way it simply stood froze me in place. I kept my eyes on the road, pretending I didn't see it. But then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. Not outside, Not on the road, but from inside the cab. My spine stiffened. I glanced at the passenger seat, and there it was. The figure, somehow inside my truck without opening a door. The air grew cold, my breath fogging in the cab, despite the rising morning sun. I blinked, and it remained, immobile, silent, observing. I tried reasoning with myself. Maybe it was a hallucination, a mix of exhaustion and the surreal events of the night. Maybe I had hit something back there without realizing it. But every logical explanation evaporated the second I felt its gaze. I could feel it. Not in my eyes, not in my ears, but deep in my chest, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Traffic increased slightly as I approached the bridge over Tampa Bay, the water glinting like mercury beneath the pale light. I dared a quick glance at the figure. It had moved closer, shifting subtly toward the dashboard, yet it didn't touch anything. My instincts screamed at me to stop, to pull over, but every ounce of training as a driver told me to keep moving. I gritted my teeth and pressed harder on the accelerator. Then the CB radio crackled, a voice distant, distorted, but unmistakably human. "Hey, you see that?" I froze. The voice belonged to one of the semi-trucks I'd passed earlier, the ones I'd ignored during the night. I wanted to respond, to ask if they had seen the same thing, but I didn't. My throat closed, my pulse hammering. Whatever this thing was, it didn't belong in our world, and I didn't want to draw attention to it. Minutes dragged by like hours. The figure didn't move closer, didn't leave, just floated silently beside me, a silent passenger in my cab. I could feel the truck vibrating under me, every engine hum amplified in my chest. A reminder that I was alive and yet completely powerless. My mind raced. What did it want? Why me? Why tonight? As I exited the bridge and entered the bustling early morning streets of St. Petersburg, the figure finally made a subtle shift. It leaned back slightly, almost as if acknowledging the change in environment. My pulse slowed just enough to think, and I realized the roads were no longer deserted. People jogging, cyclists, early commuters, none of them seemed to notice. It was as if the figure existed in a different layer of reality, unseen by everyone else. I reached a small diner at the corner of 4th Avenue and 34th Street, my hands still white-knuckled on the wheel. Every instinct told me to stop, to lock myself in and wait for the sun to rise fully. But the figure didn't resist. It simply stayed, mirroring my every movement without touching a thing. I parked, my body trembling, and sat in silence, pretending nothing was happening. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. No footsteps, no shadow, no trace. Only the lingering sense that I hadn't been alone, that the world around me was more fragile than I'd ever imagined. My hands slowly relaxed on the wheel, though my heart continued to pound. I stepped out, eyes scanning the streets. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I knew one thing for sure. Whatever I'd encountered on I-4 that night was far from over. This wasn't random. It wasn't a prank. And it certainly wasn't human. The morning sun rose higher, casting golden light over St. Petersburg. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. I sat in the diner, sipping a lukewarm coffee, pretending to scroll through my phone, but my eyes kept darting to the parking lot. Every truck, every car, every shadow seemed like a potential threat. The figure was gone. Or at least, I hoped it was gone. After what felt like hours, I convinced myself I needed to get back on the road. I couldn't stop forever. My route from Tampa to St. Petersburg was long and familiar. but I no longer trusted the comfort of routine. I eased my truck out of the lot, careful to glance into every mirror. Nothing. The streets were bustling with early commuters, oblivious to the terror that had followed me from the deserted highway. As I merged onto I-275 heading north, my mind replayed the previous night's events. The figure on the bridge, the shadow in my cab, the impossible parallel presence. Each memory sent chills down my spine. Every mile I drove, the world seemed to grow quieter. Not literally, but in the way that made your instincts scream, "Something is wrong." Then it appeared. At first, just a flicker in my peripheral vision, a shadow crossing the median. I froze, heart hammering, eyes narrowing. The highway stretched out ahead, empty lanes shimmering in the heat of the morning. I slowed slightly, but I didn't stop. The figure was moving parallel to me now, impossibly fast, keeping pace as if it could bend reality itself. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of light, exhaustion, or maybe even some kind of prank. But as I glanced toward the passenger seat, I nearly lost control. There it was again, its featureless face pressed against the glass, still silent, still immobile. It had somehow returned. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My pulse thundering, I forced myself to keep driving. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed in tense silence. Then the CB radio crackled again, this time louder, more distorted. "Do you see it?" the voice asked. My throat tightened. "Another trucker? Another witness?" I wanted to respond, but fear silenced me. I didn't know if saying anything would provoke it, or if my words would even reach someone who could help. Traffic thinned as I approached a stretch of the highway that wound through Pinellas County, tall cypress trees lining either side, shadows falling like black curtains. My cab felt smaller somehow, more suffocating. The temperature dropped several degrees, even though the sun was high in the sky. My breath fogged the inside of the windshield. And then I heard it, a faint whisper, not over the radio, not outside, but inside my head. "Keep driving." My stomach lurched. The voice was neither male nor female, neither calm nor aggressive. It was just there, inside. I slammed my palms against the wheel, trying to shake it off. But the whisper remained, persistent, chilling. Suddenly, the rearview mirror caught something impossible. Another truck, identical to mine, running parallel in the opposite lane. The driver, or whatever it was, wore the same featureless white suit. Its head turned toward me, and for the briefest second I could swear it was smiling. My instinct screamed at me to look away, but rule number 9 from the bridge flashed in my mind. Do not look for more than 10 seconds. I forced my eyes forward, heart hammering, hands trembling. The parallel truck disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. My chest heaved, adrenaline flooding every vein. I realized I couldn't outrun this. This wasn't about speed. This wasn't about distance. This presence, whatever it was, could appear anywhere, anytime. I needed answers. I couldn't just keep driving blind. My only option was to follow it. If this was a pattern, a path, or some kind of message, I had to see it through. With a trembling hand, I adjusted the CB to scan other channels, listening for any hint, any voice that could guide me. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. As I drove, the landscape blurred into a strange mixture of reality and nightmare. Buildings looked familiar, yet wrong. Shadows moved where they shouldn't, and the air itself felt thick, charged with anticipation. I reached the outskirts of Clearwater, the city rising in the distance. but I couldn't feel relief. Every instinct screamed danger. And then I saw a movement at the edge of the tree line, a group of figures, not one, but dozens, moving toward the road in unison. Their limbs stretched unnaturally, some walking backwards, some tilting sideways, but all heading in the same direction. My stomach dropped. My hands shook uncontrollably. I forced myself to breathe, remembering the lessons of the night. Keep driving, keep moving, do not acknowledge. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to stop, to hide, to flee. But I didn't. I kept my eyes on the road, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, heart hammering like a drum in my chest. This was no longer a game. It was no longer just me. Whatever this was, it was real, relentless, and it had chosen me. The sun was barely up, painting the horizon with pale oranges and pinks, yet the highway felt darker than ever. My truck hummed steadily beneath me, tires slicing through the asphalt, but every instinct screamed that I wasn't alone. The memory of the parallel truck, the whisper in my head, and the figures at the tree line pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't lift. I gripped the wheel tighter, eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. Clearwater's city lights appeared ahead, but instead of relief, a new tension surged through me. The road twisted and narrowed, and the hum of the engine seemed to sync with my heartbeat. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw them again. The figures. Not at the tree line this time, but on the overpass. Hundreds of them. All featureless, all silent, their limbs moving in unnatural synchrony. My pulse jumped. Rule number 9, the 10-second rule, flashed in my mind. I forced my gaze forward. Every instinct begged me to look. But I obeyed. My breaths came shallow and rapid, and I felt the truck vibrating as if it sensed my fear. The figures seemed to stretch endlessly, bending the limits of reality itself. Then the whisper returned, louder, clearer. Almost there. Don't stop. Keep moving. I felt my arms trembling uncontrollably. The highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon, disappearing into the unknown. My eyes flicked to the side mirrors, half expecting another parallel truck. Nothing. Silence. For the first time, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe this nightmare was finally ending. But then the dashboard lights flickered violently, and the cab plunged into darkness. My breath caught in my throat. The whisper turned urgent, almost frantic. Do not stop. Do not turn. Do not look. The figures appeared again. This time they weren't just at the sides or above. They were inside. My stomach dropped. I could feel their presence pressing against the glass, shadows bending in impossible ways. Panic surged through every fiber of my being, but I gripped the wheel and kept moving, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. The highway ended in a stretch of open road. Ahead, a bridge arched over the river, its metal framework glowing faintly in the early morning light. I felt the truck's vibrations deepen as I approached. The whisper, now almost a shout inside my mind, commanded, "Final stop. Stay vigilant." I pressed forward, every second stretching into eternity. My vision blurred with sweat, fear, and adrenaline. The figures at last receded slightly, giving me the narrowest window of clarity. The bridge loomed closer. I could feel the rules of that impossible night. The bridge, the parallel truck, the shadow, everything connecting into a single, terrifying purpose. And then, in the distance, I saw him, the man from the diner, featureless, hypnotic, calm. He stood at the edge of the bridge, motioning me forward. My body screamed at me to stop, to flee, but something inside me obeyed. I pressed the accelerator, driving straight toward him. The bridge stretched endlessly. The cab lights flickered one final time, and suddenly the figures vanished. No whisper, no shadows, no parallel truck. Just me, the road, and the man. He stepped aside, allowing the truck to pass safely over the bridge. The sun broke fully over the horizon, casting everything in warm light. Reality returned. I exhaled, shaking, gripping the wheel, unable to speak. The bridge ended, the road opened into the familiar streets of St. Petersburg, and the nightmare finally seemed to release me. The cab was silent, my pulse slowed, my hands ached. I looked around, no figures, no shadows, nothing but morning traffic and the distant hum of the city waking up. Somehow, some impossible force had guided me through the night. The rules, the whispers, the parallel presence. It all had a purpose I would never fully understand. All I knew was that I survived. I parked my truck, stepped out, and breathed deeply. The night's terror was over, replaced by the calm of a new day. And though I would never forget the figures, the whisper, or the parallel truck, I finally felt the weight lift. If you've ever wondered about the road, about the unknown forces that might follow you, let this story be a warning and a reminder. Out there, the world isn't always what it seems. And sometimes, survival isn't about speed or strength. It's about obedience, vigilance, and courage. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life terrifying experiences from truckers and drivers across the U.S., make sure to hit that like button, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss a spine-chilling tale. Remember, the highway isn't always safe, and neither is what's watching from the shadows.